atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and joining me, as always, my lovely co-host and editor.
Hello, I am Rex.
And we are back at it again for the third week of Kawasaki Month.
The third, but not final, just yet.
True. This is technically, if you want to be technical, this is the 7th week of Minoru Kawasaki Month, if you want to count last year's.
Right.
And oddly enough, this is one of our last, because...
And funnily enough, this is also the first episode we've recorded after GXK.
Yeah. But it's kind of sad thinking about, because, I mean, spoiler alert, there's only one more Kawasaki film released in the States that we haven't covered that's on physical.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to keep it a secret what next week's episode's going to be.
I mean, hey, as long as the listeners don't look it up and don't already know, then we're safe.
This is true.
So don't look it up.
But with this, like, after these two, we're out. Unless between now and next April, 4 Kawasaki films get released in the States randomly.
Well, hey, we're not saying goodbye just yet.
True. That'll be next week. I might cry because this has been kind of like... I've really enjoyed these Kawasaki episodes. This has been a lot of fun to like cover and just talk about, and
yeah, I think they were always a nice change of pace from what I usually watch as well. They are. Speaking of a change of pace, Rex, what's happened in your life? Anything cool? Anything that changes your pace? Not particularly. I mean, I was going to go camping this week, but it seems my pace has changed because that ended up getting cancelled due to various reasons. And yeah, that's unfortunate. But hey, it has been nice having a couple extra days to relax. So I'm not going to complain too much about that.
See, I can't relate to any of that because all of that is like first of all,
foreign concept to you.
I don't do camping. Second of all,
I haven't done it in about 10 years.
I don't have time to go camping. Third of all, days off to relax. What is that? I'm lucky to get 2 hours to relax.
Yeah, that's why you have a broken sleep schedule.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually very true.
That's sad.
Like, I have no set schedule. Like, my life is literally... Well, I have schedules. I know what I need to do. I just don't factor in sleeping, really, that much.
Evidently.
I blame you mostly for that because, you know, you kind of are the leading problem in my life.
Hey now. Well, on that topic of you being busy, how have you been?
Busy? I just said that.
Yeah, but have you done anything interesting or?
Well, okay. So I wasn't planning on talking about this. I thought this would be something that I would talk about later down the road, but to a surprise to me, I'm a part of the marketing. So it came out this last week, as of this recording, that I am working as the Blu-ray producer on SRS Cinema's War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron versus Goron. Gora?
Congratulations.
It's Gora, I think.
You don't even know the name? Jesus.
Okay, it's just confusing. I think it's Gora. The newest Shinpei Hayashida film, the same director of Deep Sea Monster Rigo versus Battleship Yamato, Deep Sea Monster Raiga, and God Raiga versus King Oga. So that's pretty exciting. This is my third SRS title I'm working on. I worked on Yuzo, the biggest battle in Tokyo, as we have talked about, I think, to a decent amount. I also made it public that I'm working on the upcoming release of Liverleaf, which is a Japanese horror. I say horror, but I don't agree with that label. Thriller teen movie. And then War of the Ninja Monsters. So my work schedule is booked because I'm not trying to like make it seem like I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but when SRS attaches me to these films, I put as much love and effort into them as I would want to see on these releases. So,
right,
that's because I want these. I want these films to have amazing releases. I want these films to have so much information in them that it's like, whoa, like this is a lot. And so that's kind of how I approach these. And I've got some, I think both Liverleaf and Ninja Monsters, we've got some pretty good plans for. It's just going to be a lot of effort, a lot of time. Speaking of a lot of time and effort, I also have a short film I'm supposed to be producing anytime. As of this recording, it probably is already filming, like when it goes out. And I just got my first professional level video camera.
Nice.
Yeah. It's a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, which has put me back about the price of a used car, but
yeah, but hey, at least you don't have to go through the trouble of renting a camera for however many days, doing all that paperwork, and at least you just have it for yourself. Well, what tokusatsu have you watched?
Did you not just hear what I said? I've been busy working on films and shooting footage.
Okay, look, you've said that. You didn't 100% confirm if you'd seen any or not. So I had to ask, have you seen Godzilla Kong any extra times or what have you?
No, I was hoping to watch some more Ultraman 80 or a couple other films. Had no time. I've been, if I'm not at work, I'm working on SRS. If I'm not doing those, I'm working on podcast stuff. If I'm not doing any of those, I'm passed out somewhere.
Fair enough. I haven't really
How about you, Rex?
I myself have not really watched any tokusatsu outside of one episode of Garo, the final episode of the latest Garo series.
Mm-hmm.
It was whatever. It was a fun episode.
So, two things. One, I think it's funny that when I don't watch tokusatsu, it just so happens to seem like you don't watch tokusatsu.
Well, usually, I'm pretty sure it used to be the opposite, actually, at one point.
Where,
if I watched tokusatsu, you would have watched none. If you'd watched tokusatsu, I would have only watched, a tiny bit. Mm-hmm. But it was generally, I'd watch tokusatsu, you had watched, two things, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so how the turntables have turned.
Yeah, that's the quote.
That's the quote. That's the quote. How the tables have turned into tables.
How the turns have tabled.
But yeah, I do hope that by next recording I can say I've watched a little bit more. But my second question for you was, overall, now that you've seen, because I know I asked you previously how where you would rank this Garo show. Now that it's 100% done, where would you rank it?
Somewhere around the middle to lower middle, I would say.
Okay.
It's definitely not near the worst series. I think this Garo show has been okay, but it hasn't really been much better than okay, unfortunately. There have been some cool suits, but yeah, I hope that if we get another show after this, the next show is a little either bigger in scope or tells a more fresh story, because I felt this season of Garo was it was kind of been there, done that in some regards, especially in terms of its villain. Garo has like two villain archetypes that appear in like 70% of like the entries in the Garo series, and I'm kind of sick of them doing the same thing with their villains. There's a couple exceptions. Garo has a couple really good villains, but yeah.
Okay, interesting. Now, before we go into the discussion for the day, we did get a trailer recently. As of this recording, it's been like a month, almost a month, but we got a trailer. During our Kaiju in 2024 episode, we talked that Tsuburaya would be doing its yearly Ultraman series, and we recently got the title and the trailer,
Ultraman
and some
Arc.
of the yes, Ultraman Arc. So, first thoughts, opinions.
So to be honest, I haven't actually watched the trailer yet. But I have seen, the design and a few images from it. I like the Showa look. I'm not huge on the head, but the actual main body for the Ultra looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I love, because they use the same font as they did for Ultraman Ace's logo.
And he's got like the body language of Jack.
Yeah. He's got the body language of Jack, he's got the pose. And then, the show just in general looks like your typical new gen Ultraman. But it does look like we're getting some original kaiju again.
Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, these Blazer in this show, from what I understand, have had less of the restrictions that previous Ultra shows have had from like Bandai and their other sponsors. So who knows? Maybe they'll push the bounds even further than they did with Blazer, because from what I understand, they pushed some bounds, but we're definitely still held back by the ruling hand of Bandai.
Right. And it's nice to see that Ultraman is starting to get back to where it was.
Yeah, it's nice to see some more creative freedom coming into the series again.
It definitely feels like we're about to go through another golden age of Ultraman.
Hopefully.
I will
say one thing that is really cool to hear is that Arc is being dubbed in about 11 different languages.
Which that's awesome. And it's going to be simulcasted on YouTube.
Yeah. I don't think all the languages are on YouTube, but they're like airing in their respective countries, like TV channels, of course.
Which is awesome. Like, I never thought that we would get to a point where like the newest Ultraman is getting broadcast in my own language within a week of the Japanese release.
Not even within a week, within the day.
That's true. That's true now. Because it used to be a week, now it's a day. So
I mean, it's the same day.
Right.
Same day,
so,
simulcast.
That's awesome. I feel like we're starting to get to a point where like the gap between the content from Japan and America, or even like Australia, is getting smaller and smaller with film festivals and
I mean, it's just helped by the fact that Tsuburaya themselves are pushing for the global audience.
Right.
Which is a very smart move, in my opinion.
And I feel
a lot
like
of people love Ultraman across the world.
And I think one of the greatest parts about that is simply the fact that it starts to make Ultraman feel like a international IP. similar to that of like Superman, but like this isn't like an American product, right? This is a Japanese product.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, that Japanese background is not altered, except for the one exception of Ultraman Rising. Yeah. Which is my leading reason for why I have a lack of interest in that movie.
I don't know. The movie itself, it's seemingly even more kid oriented than like a lot of the new gen shows, so it doesn't really appeal to me. I'll probably give it a watch anyways, because it's Ultraman, it's a new Ultraman movie. It's got, have some appearance, some cool designs, and has a interesting looking art style, so I'll give it a chance. But I don't expect it to really appeal to me that much.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful, but I'm not sold on it. And then on top of just that, I need to just watch more Ultraman in general.
Yeah. Yeah, when are we doing Tiga? May, you said?
May.
I think?
May, yes. We agreed on May to start our watching of Ultraman Tiga every night.
Bet I get on 80 then.
Yeah, I got 15 episodes of 80, which in theory, if I even just watched one a day, I could make that deadline. But the way I typically like to do is I like to binge them, like 4 at a time. I also just haven't had the time, and I probably, I don't know if I will have the time, because when I'm not at work, I'm still working. I'll figure it out.
Sure you will.
I'll try. Look, man,
No.
If you were in my shoes, you would have the same problem.
But I'm not in your shoes.
So you don't have the same. You don't understand me. That's your problem.
Okay.
But speaking of problems, we have a problem.
Yeah.
We have a movie to cover, and we haven't covered it yet.
Yeah.
So we should do that.
Yeah. Do you know what we're covering?
So it's Kawasaki Month.
He doesn't know.
I have a 50-50 shot here.
Do you know what the two options even are?
Pussy Soup and Denise?
No. Those aren't released in the West, sadly.
Oh,
I guess I gotta be the bearer of your bad news, because we're covering what you have previously stated to be one of your least favorite kaiju movies, Monster X Strikes Back, Attack the G8 Summit.
Oh, no.
Your favorite.
Oh, boy. Yes, we are covering Monster X Strikes Back, Attack the G8 Summit.
And interestingly, this is actually a sequel to a film that we have previously covered that was not a part of Kawasaki Month.
Yes. The X from Outer Space, released in 1967 by Shochiku, which we covered in last year's Kaiju Month, correct?
Yes.
So now we're finally catching up, and we're covering the spiritual sequel. I would say it's more of a reboot.
It technically isn't the second movie that Gillalas appeared in.
Yeah, if we want to be technical, because there's a couple of cameos.
Falling Leaves and the Kisses, where like the suit makes some form of appearance. Tora-san's Forbidden Love, where some stock footage of Gilala appears, presumably on a TV, if I had to guess. And then also he appeared in one of the Denise shorts, Denise Will Definitely Lose Weight, Space Monster Small Advance, where he appeared in both stock footage and like an arm prop.
Right. But this is the second Gulala focused film.
The second proper Gulala movie.
Yes. So before we really go any further, what's your background and history with this film?
I knew about it for a YouTube review, but I'd wanted to see it for a while, but I had never actually gotten around to seeing it.
Gotcha. So this was your first time?
Yes.
Okay.
I've never seen
So
it
for
before.
me, I saw this movie like 2012, 2013. That was when I was starting to like branch out and watch more kaiju movies than just Godzilla. Like I was trying to get into Gamera, Ultraman. You know, I knew all about the Dogaras and the Frankenstein Conquers the World and all that, right?
Right.
So this movie popped up on my searches called Monster X Strikes Back, Attack the G8 Summit. I didn't know the X from Outer Space was its spiritual predecessor.
Mm-hmm.
So after like months of waiting, I finally found a copy on eBay and I bought it. Now at the time I was young and stupid, so like if it didn't have a dub, I was kind of upset.
Oh, you sweet innocent child.
So then I like put this movie in and it was subtitled and there was no way to get a dub. And when the people who spoke English, there were subtitles in Japanese. And I was like, this is the worst thing ever. But more
you
so,
should have seen. I saw a Korean movie recently, and I had a surprise. I did get used to it, but I was caught off guard when not only did it have English subtitles, but it also had Chinese subtitles above the English subs. And then in some scenes, because the characters in this movie would sometimes speak Japanese, there would be Korean subs below it. So at some points, there'd just be 3 different language subtitles on screen.
it's almost like a Shin Godzilla moment.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I'll have that experience soon.
Yeah. So, like, not only was I already soured, but, like, I watched the movie, and at the time, first of all, I didn't know who Minoru Kawasaki was. I didn't even know he directed this movie until a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But more so than that, like, I hated the fact it was a comedy because historically, I always take these films kind of serious. Now, in more recent times, I've been willing to accept the comedy aspect of the kaiju genre.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I'm still probably one of the quickest people to say comedy isn't the way to do your kaiju movies. Because how can you expect your audience to be sold by it if you yourself cannot sell it by not producing a actual like serious film? But I still understand the idea behind making comedy kaiju movies, and there's obviously a market for it and a place for it because
especially
there's
in the 2000s.
yes, there's like at least a dozen that are just made to be comedies or parodies.
Right.
In
in terms of post-Final Wars movies, after Gamera the Brave bombed, in terms of Suitmation kaiju movies, you really mostly just had comedies like this, like Death Kappa. Is what you call the movie, the one with the slug for like 10 seconds?
Demi King the Sea Monster?
Yeah. Is that a comedy or
no? That's a drama.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one, so I can't comment on that one.
Yeah, that one's a drama.
Okay, but yeah, you had at least a few of these comedies films in those dry year period.
Right. To that, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact, and I think Kawasaki talked about this in an interview. When Final Wars bombed and then Gamera the Brave bombed, like everybody was like, wait a minute. The 2 biggest names in the entire kaiju
just
sphere
bombed.
Yeah. And then before Akio Soji's death, him and Kawasaki had a conversation about how Ultraman had grown stale, had grown dry, and that the heart and soul of Ultraman was gone. And now by the time that we're talking, like 2008, when this film came out, looking at...
Wasn't this around the time as well that, like, there was a lot of infighting in the Tsuburaya family as well?
I think so, yeah. That was right before this whole film came out right before Mega Monster Battle Galaxy Ultra Fight Legends,
That's
the movie
right.
Galaxy, right?
Yeah, that'd be that was 2009.
And like, at least from my outlook, now keep in mind my understanding of it is like it's literally just an all-out monster brawl with a bunch of suits on green screen.
Pretty much, yeah. And Ultra's in the movie.
Like,
not in the show.
That just like screams like we're just doing this because we can. And I know before
the
like
show was also like it was kind of like an experiment for like a specific broadcasting method. It wasn't streaming, but it wasn't standard television broadcast either. I don't remember what. I think it was an on-demand service or something, or an on-demand network.
Gotcha.
I could be misremembering, but they didn't. Mega Monster Battle was not a main series, so it was aired a little differently, essentially.
Gotcha. And then before this, you had like Ultra 7X, which I know historically has been critically like bashed.
Yeah, I mean that was a midnight drama as well. So even
and before
that,
like
experimenting a bit, I guess.
Right, and before that, you know, I think
Mebius,
Cosmos
came before 7X, and I don't think Mebius did well. You have to fact check me on that, but I don't think Mebius did well.
I know Nexus bombed
infamously.
Yeah. I know, like, and even like not talking those, but like you had Ultraman Neos, which just kind of seems like in the middle of like whatever. And
mean, Neos is a bit weird where its pilot came out like years before the rest of the show.
Right.
It was made years before the rest of the show, actually, or something like that.
And then you have like Ultraman Cosmos, which from my perspective, I've heard some conflicting opinions here.
I used to hear negative, but nowadays I hear positive.
So like that was a negative.
But I know Cosmos was, at least the movies for Cosmos were negatively affected by some negative press involving one of the actors like getting involved in I want to say it was some sort of controversy that ended up not being true. That he wasn't involved with, but people thought he was involved with it, and so he kind of got kicked out of one of the movies, even though he was the lead actor of the show.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I think it was Cosmos 2, the movie.
So really, like, post your Tigadina Gaia,
Ultraman
you had Cosmos
doing the best. It was kind of up and down
yes.
for a bit.
Now, like, in retrospective, like, I hear nothing but praise for Nexus. I'm hearing good things about Cosmos. I hear good things about Mebius and Max. But it kind of sounds like at the time they were just kind of viewed as Ultramans being washed up. So, really, your like, classic kaiju tokusatsu stuff was all coming from the indie scene. You had the television special Gihara, the long-haired monster. You had Shinpei Hayashi's Deep Sea Rigo versus Battleship Yamato and Deep Sea Monster Raiga. You had Demi King the Sea Monster from Jolly Roger. Death Kappa in 2010, Monster X Strikes Back, Attack the G8 Summit. And you have this entire niche subgenre of independent kaiju movies that typically are more comedic in nature and low enough budget that they can't be hurt by the lack of interest in the genre at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really what kept the genre going until 2012, 2013 with like Del Toro's Pacific Rim and Legendary's Godzilla, Attack on Titan in 2015, Shin Godzilla in 2016, and the rise of Ultraman again, no pun intended there. With like Ultraman Orb and X and Jeed and Rube, eventually getting to Taiga and Z and Trigger and Decker and Blazar and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is considered the second film in Kawasaki's Earth Destruction series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is Earth Defense Widow number 3? I couldn't figure out which one was number 3.
I don't know if there was a third. Earth Defense Widow is actually a like spin-off of a like entire series that Kawasaki has done with Earth Widows, like Defense Widows.
Huh. And that just has Den Ace as a character too.
Yes. All I know is the first was The World Sinks Except Japan.
Yeah.
Which both of these films share very similar concepts.
Yeah.
Throughout
and there's
the
a few other funny connections, like in production, because like both shoots started with Kawasaki being ill for the first few days. The film was announced on January 29 at a press conference where that announced Kawasaki as the director and also announced 3 of the cast members, whom were members of a comedy group known as the Newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
All of whom were dressed up as, and their seats were labeled as 3 of the prime ministers of Japan.
Right. Now, one of them was going to play Prime Minister Yasuo Fukuda.
Yeah, who was the current prime minister at the time.
Right, who's going to be played by Matabe Watanabe, but because they didn't really look alike, they ended up cutting that character from the film and put him in as one of the villagers. A lot of changes happened before the film was even announced. The development for this film basically started right after The World Sinks Except Japan came out, which was in 2006. So it took about 2 years for this film to eventually materialize into what it was.
Right, but Kawasaki did do a couple other films in between.
Yes. His plan is typically to do 3 films a year. So, between this and Monster X, he probably, I want to say he did about 5 movies. So what had happened is The World Sinks Except Japan came out, and it did very well. Not only financially, but it got some good recognition, won some awards, all that. And so one of the head executives of Shochiku approached Kawasaki, and mostly because he had seen Den Ace, and he loved Den Ace. But he was getting a lot of press at the time, and he said, "Hey, could you do a film for Shochiku?" And from there, they're like, "Well, what can we do?" And Shochiku was like, "Well, we have Gulala. Do you want to reboot Gulala?" And like Kawasaki was like, "Yes, let's do it." Initially, the plan was to have it be called Monster X Strikes Back: Attack the Beijing Olympics, because at the time, the Beijing Olympics were going to happen, and the film was planned to be released in September of 2008. But the executives at Shochiku were like, well, the G8 summit is happening in the summer. Why wouldn't we, capitalize on that? So at that point, they changed it to be the G8 summit, and they kind of went from there. But even before all of that, another idea that Kawasaki had was to have a monster living underneath Tokyo Tower and have its horn actually be Tokyo Tower and it get up. But Shochiku was very quick to say, 1, don't do that with the Tokyo Tower. 2, we can't, the finances will not work for that. And 3, we're wanting something a little safer to do. So even that got canned. More so than that, an interesting thing is, before Monster X Strikes Back was even a thing, Kawasaki had been wanting to do a kaiju film, because up until this point, unless you count his Den-Ace shorts, he had not done a kaiju movie, right?
Right.
Now, since then, he's done Kaiju Mono, Earth Defense Widow, Monster Seafood Wars, so he's done more kaiju films, but this was his first. But even before all of this, he had caught wind of Katakawa wanting to reboot Daimajin, and it was going to be directed by Takashi Miike. So he started planning a Daimajin spoof called Takemajin. Now, as we all know, unfortunately, the Miike Daimajin film did not happen.
Thanks to a little bomb known as Gamera at the Braves box office.
Right. So when that happened, the movie of Takemajin basically was put on ice. But once they got to Monster X Strikes Back, as you've brought up, Rex, Kawasaki kind of has just a list of ideas, and he's like, let's throw this in there, let's just do this. It's absurd, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, I've got Takemajin, so let's throw him in there. Mm-hmm. And that was how we got Takemajin.
Was he called Takemajin when he was coming up with the Daimajin spoof idea?
That was what Kawasaki referred to him as, was Takemajin.
Because the thing with the Takemajin name, from what I understand, the Take in the name comes from the actor playing Takemajin, or voicing him.
Now, keep in mind,
the same guy always planning to have this actor play Takemajin in the original Daimajin spoof idea? Or is he just referring to this original idea that evolved into Takemajin as the same thing?
So it's one of two things. One, it was Beat Takashi was always planned to be a part of Takemajin. Mm-hmm. Or based off the translation, it was because it was Takashi Miike doing it. Takashi Miike Takemajin.
I feel like it makes more sense either it was always intended to be the Count Beat, or it's just this original idea didn't have the name Takemajin, but eventually would get the name in this film. That's my interpretation, at least, based on what you're saying.
But either way, I thought that was kind of surprising. Now, the script for this film was completed in winter of 2007. So it at least had it probably started pre-production officially probably somewhere in October, maybe September, October. Finished in November, December, announced in January, filming then commenced in February and March, post in April.
Not quite accurate. It's shooting started March 29th.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure if it lasted, how long exactly it lasted. It was definitely over by April 28th. So it could have been a month, but there's some, I suspect it could have also just been 8 days, but I can't confirm that.
I mean, that's pretty par for the course for a Kawasaki film.
Yeah. Yeah. It was at absolute least 8 days. but I can't actually confirm for sure.
Right.
If those because they were like it was like location diary entries from Kawasaki that were on the website for like a production note for the website for this film, and I don't know if they were all like one day after another. It's like each consecutive day, or if there was like any gaps in, because it didn't say the actual date for any of them. So I'm not entirely sure, but there were about 8 entries, so at least 8 days.
Right. I do know that Kawasaki mentioned that like they couldn't really go a day over because that would cost like 10 million yen more.
Right.
Which they didn't have the budget for. And Kawasaki, his company Rivertop Films, paid 10% of the film's production costs.
Yeah, and Kawasaki, in spite of being sick for the first few days, still went on like a champ to, do his best to keep the show going.
Right,
and even like apparently one day during a lunch break, they were just hit by a tornado.
I know that he mentioned that one day there was rain, but they still had to power through it.
Yeah. No, there's one entry where he mentions like either like a tornado or at the very least very heavy winds.
Mm-hmm.
That ended up like throwing like a lot of like some of their production tents ended up being like thrown away because of the wind. Huh. And then tons of rain on like a couple days.
And so that's really all I have on the pre-production. This is easily his most interesting in terms of the fact that like there were so many different ideas tossed out before we got to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because this film feels more like Kawasaki was asked to direct it.
Yeah, it doesn't feature as many of the things that my brain kind of associates with Kawasaki. Like it doesn't feature. In some ways, it does. In some ways, it doesn't. Because in some regards, this film kind of retreads the world sinks except Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It recycles some actors
for
role. Yeah, true. For roles and like parts of the ending are straight just recycled.
Right. No, I have a sneaking suspicion that they recycled their script for World Sinks Except Japan, but reworked it with the Takemajin concepts, the Gulala issue, and the G8 Summit location.
I don't know. This film, to me, it feels a bit It feels different, but also it's in the same line as World Sinks Except Japan, of course, being a second in that World Destruction trilogy, as far as we know, possible trilogy. But it definitely feels, it has a different overall feel to, like, say, Executive Koala or his other animal movies, like Calamari Wrestler as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I think what it is that this film feels like it's less like it's throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks, and more like it actually has like one kind of consistent idea for a through line with the script that it specifically wants to be a kaiju film.
Right.
That's a satire of the world leaders and has some environmental themes.
Now, before we dive into that, I think we should go ahead and, unless you have any more production or pre-production,
I guess just one thing that somehow didn't occur to me at all, I think, until like a few days ago, was that the obvious reason why Kawasaki's films always have a short production cycle, like how he always shoots films in like 7-8 days, it's because he has a background in commercials and television. I should have realized this from the start, but I don't know. No wonder he shoots so quickly. Even one of the actors of this film, Kazuki Kato, and even the extras who appear in a couple scenes in this film were all shocked at how quickly Kawasaki shoots his films and how early they get to go home. Like on a Kawasaki, Kazuki Kato, one of the leads in this film, talked about how like he wants to have a good sleep at night, so he stops shooting at 10 p.m. sharp and lets everyone go home, compared to usual TV and movie shooting.
Right, because usually it's like you wake up really early and you go until really late, and like on average you only sleep like 5 hours on a shoot, if you're lucky.
Depending on the country and your laws.
Right. And how old you are and all that.
Yeah.
No, then that makes sense because, Kawasaki, I think when I think of Kawasaki, the thing he's most, I think, obviously known for in Japan is Den-Ace, which is a 70 entry franchise over the course of 40 years.
Mm-hmm. It should have been obvious to me that he came from a TV background, but actually taking another look at his filmography and stuff, I'm like, oh, this makes sense now.
Yeah. Now, I've got some more stuff, but I'm gonna talk about them as we go through the film.
Yeah,
so,
likewise.
If you're ready, I'm ready to dive into Monster X Strikes Back Attack the G8 Summit.
As the film opens, we kick straight into gears with a meeting with the world leaders meeting at the G8 Summit.
Right, which at first I thought they were going to do the Clintons. I thought they were doing Bill and Hillary, but turns out it was President Berger and the Germany president. Yeah.
I mean, for this film, they're doing all of the members of the 33rd G8 Summit, which was in 2007, the one before this.
Mm-hmm.
Because this film actually came out it came out after the 34th G8 Summit, but in Hokkaido, where the film's set, and where the G8 Summit actually happened in Japan in 2008. The film was actually released a few days before the summit.
Right, it was released July 5th in Hokkaido to bank off of that, and then July 26th to the rest of Japan.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone all of the G8 members in this film are based off of all of the real core G8 members of the 33rd Summit in 2007. Except for one of the members of the European Union, who just gets excluded.
It's fine. It works. Now, a lot of this opening is it's just establishing shots of beautiful Hokkaido countryside, too. We get our shots of, the G8 Summit with the flags and our representatives. But a lot of it, too, is just wide shots of Hokkaido.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we kind of get introduced pretty quickly to hints of what the movie's theme is. Pretty straight early on with two, I don't really want to say lead characters because this is more of an ensemble film.
Yes,
kind of like how World Sinks Except Japan was. But there are two main characters outside of the world leaders, I guess.
Yeah.
And they are two reporters, Sumire and Sanpei.
Which, to me, if we're doing the whole comparison to the World Sinks, these two are our replacements for the movie star and his wife. Because they're the solid subplot that is exploring the on-the-ground situations going on while our world leaders...
they don't really serve the same purpose as the the characters in World Sinks. They serve different purposes narratively.
Right. They're more of our exposition.
I mean, it's more like this film, a good chunk of the film is dedicated to the G8 Summit members, so the world leaders, And then these two characters, these two reporters, and anyone they interact with are representative of like just the people, the regular citizens. In this case of Japan, but more just, I guess, in general, is how I kind of see how I see it, I guess.
Right.
Because the interesting thing is, not to spoil what happens, but the world leaders in this movie are kind of useless. And that's the joke.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. In the film, and I'm not surprised by this, primarily, they go after, at the time, well, I guess now too, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
I mean, it's throwing jabs at basically everyone.
It does, but it throws the most of its jabs at Abe-san.
I don't know if I would say the most of its jabs. There's a lot of... I feel like some of the jokes are... You could miss them. And then there's quite a few jokes that I didn't even realize until I was looking it up, like quite the extent of what they meant. Like with Abe, I didn't realize that the reason they kept making jokes about his bowels was because that's the reason why he actually resigned from office.
Yep.
Both times.
and because of the fact that, and he wasn't even there, spoiler alert, for the final solution. He was absent.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, and like I had done a lot of research on Shinzo Abe for a project recently, and so for me, it was like, oh, now this all makes sense.
Yeah.
And funny enough, it still is relevant because the reason why Abe left the second time he was in office was because
the same issue.
He was not.
It just had worsened.
Yeah, it was the same situation. Yeah, and so it was like, this still is relevant. This film, even though it is over 15 years old.
Yeah, I mean, even with like you could, if you want to look at it from, what would come a few years after this film was released, with our stand-in Abe not being there for like most of the disaster. You could look at like in a more modern example, like the Tohoku tsunami and earthquake, and like criticism of the government for being slow and not really stepping in until later on, and just being,
right,
like I said, too slow.
I also think
so it's still kind of relevant in that regards as well.
Right. I also think of Prime Minister Suga, former Prime Minister Suga's whole push to open up Japan again during the COVID-19 pandemic, completely like ignoring the fact that COVID was still very much a bad situation in late 2020, and just like making it so it runs rampant. And then after it starts getting bad, that's when they started being like, well, maybe we should shut down again. So even like now, it's like in recent time, it's still relevant.
Right. But even there's some good jabs at a lot of the other
I agree.
world leaders too. Like one of the more memorable characters, the French leader, Sarkozy, who's based off the president of France in 2007 to 2012, Sarkozy. They poked some jabs at his very real private life in France, when he essentially got into a whole cuckold situation with his now ex-wife, and then would basically just, as soon as she left, like around the time this film came out, he would have just remarried, and they joke about that in the film, with him trying to start an affair with his interpreter, which, there were rumors at the time prior to his divorce that Sarkozy was having an affair with a journalist. So, some real basis in that.
Right. And even like the Russian president who's playing Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. who's just straight up called Putin.
Yeah, is very, very, like, throughout the film, he's very anti-American. He's very quick to try to take over and just with force, only to, like, not clearly have it figured out.
Right. And I mean, they reference real assassination that Putin is believed to be involved in. So,
and then, like, the representative for Germany, she straight up says, we're used to cleaning up after Russia's messes. So they already have a plan in place. So yeah, like, this film is very politically, like, alive.
Oh yeah.
And
just as much, if not even a little more than World Thinks Except Japan in some ways.
Mm-hmm. And and we're going to get into it as we continue here, but I love how it very clearly shows that it doesn't, and again, this is relevant because of COVID. No matter what, if the world is facing a big disaster, the countries cannot figure it out and come together.
Mm-hmm.
The differences will not save it. Like, it's up to the people to get with it and figure it out, which is the whole concept of this movie.
Yeah, which I found was a surprisingly interesting angle to tell this story.
It's, to relate it to something else, it's a lot like Godzilla -1 in that regard.
In a sense.
The government is not going to do anything because they don't want to create issues with Russia and America, and Japan doesn't have the artillery to do anything. And so it's up to the people, the private citizens, to use what they have to fight the problem.
Right. Right. And I mean, yeah, in the real world, the G8 summit has been criticized for just not doing enough. Like, the big thing this film kind of focuses on is like a climate change, global warming environmentalist angle, which was in the 33rd G8 summit that happened prior to this film's release, the most recent one. That was hosted in Germany, and one of the big focuses of that was climate change, and because the leader of Germany, Angela Merkel, in real life, the chancellor from 2005 to 2021, she kind of has a bit of a background in the Ministry of the Environment, and has been, a big advocate for renewable energy at G8 negotiations. And so that was a big focus on the 2007 G8 summit, and was one of the focuses of the then upcoming 2008 G8 summit. Although people ended up being disappointed by the results, where the G8 leaders just agreed we need to cut carbon emissions, and they just set goals to decrease by 50%, which people criticized as being kind of a toothless response to the issue.
Huh. And I think it's interesting that, like, Gulala's main energy source
is high temperature energy.
Yes. Almost like we're terraforming the planet to Gulala's liking, right?
Right.
Which I think, it's not the nuclear approach, but it's a very similar approach where, like, mankind's folly is what is helping give these monsters their life, their energy, and with that will destroy us.
Yeah.
So in that regards, I think Monster X Strikes Back is one of Kawasaki's more...
I was surprised by how compared to a lot of his other films, it was more thematically interesting than a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
With, like, the only comparable one being its spiritual predecessor, World Sinks.
Which, oddly enough, both of them are based on movies inspired by or based on Showa-era films. The World Sinks Except Japan obviously came out around the time of Japan Sinks, the Shinji Higuchi remake of the 1973 film Submersion of Japan.
Or just Japan Sings.
Right. And Monster X Strikes Back is a love letter to the late 1960s Japanese kaiju boom.
Although I will say, I did definitely get some GMK vibes at a couple scenes. I felt there was a little bit of Kaneko influence.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue to kind of go back into the plot of this film. After our introduction, we, of course, are following our two film journalists who hear music in the woods.
Yeah.
So they go searching for it. And one thing that I found interesting was in the woods, there's some fog. It's very clearly trying to be a little spooky.
It looks a lot like the forest from early, like that disappearing forest in GMK that Yuri and a couple of the other characters visit.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that I could tell right away, and I could tell here, and this is like an issue I even have with Gamera the Brave, and I don't know if it's the transfer, even though I highly doubt it because, I mean, this film was brand new when it got, came to the States, really. But it's very tan. It's very brown. It's very orange.
I just took that as that was the color grade. It's kind of just a trend in the color grading at this time in this like mid to late 2000s era of Japanese films.
Right. And for me, it's just I'm not a huge fan of that washed out neutral look.
I think some films it works better for than others.
I will say this. I think in Gamera the Brave, it's not as obnoxious. In the moments in Final Wars where stuff like that does happen, I can get by it because that film just has a very dynamic color palette in general.
Final Wars is also just one of the most 2000s movies, and that was kind of just a general trend with a lot of 2000s movies, was that washed out, murky, or very, very noticeable color grades.
Mm-hmm. But that is one criticism I do have for this film specifically, is I'm just not, and that's a personal taste thing. Like, I don't think that's something that they did wrong. It's just in my personal taste. I like more vibrant looking films.
That's
I don't
fair.
like washed out looking films. But they're, the whole color palette concept is a taste thing. Is like, what do you like? Some people love like The Matrix, right? Talking 2000s looks,
Yeah, I have a soft spot for like that 2000s color grading and this murky look, because that's a lot of the films I grew up with look like this.
Right. But while they are in the woods, they do start to hear the music again, which they find a hidden village with people dancing and chanting, very much like King Kong versus Godzilla. Like, the song just sounds very the ritual of...
Right. Although these people and the ritual and the whole thing with Marchand, not only is it inspired by Marchand, but it's also more inspired by King Caesar as well, especially with the prophecy element that's introduced a bit more later in the film.
Right. The one thing that I will say that takes me out of this scene, and it's a budgetary problem, so I'm not going to say it's a problem with the film, but it's a budgetary problem. The song sounds like it's being sang by a lot more people than just the 15, 20 people that are standing in that little open area.
Yeah, it didn't bother me, but I guess, yeah.
But also, while they're dancing and doing this ritual, we get some shots of one of the shrines of the temples with Gulala and Takemajin engraved on it. And a Biolante vine?
Yeah, I noticed that.
I'm not complaining. I'm sure that's just a reference. But I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like this random Biollante Vine's just in with Gulala.
I mean, maybe that's his tail, actually. Because he's got like a pincer tail.
Maybe. Yeah, kind of like destroy his tail end. Maybe.
Yeah, that's probably what it is, actually.
Now, they treat this scene very much like a King Kong moment, where the civilized people are finding the secret ritual for this great god, and the camera guy just starts walking out to get like closer shots. And then they all like see him and they like stop, which the cut of them singing ending is it's pretty they could have done that maybe a little bit better. And like it just cuts. Like there's no fade out. There's just boom.
There's a small fade out, but yeah.
It's to prevent the audio clipping that would have obviously occurred. And then they are like, get out. And then they start like stoning these people and throwing rocks.
Well, they don't start stoning until later.
Oh, that's right. But they do chase him out and they like go away.
Yeah.
And then we go back to our G8 summits where this is where we get the whole rundown with the whole climate issues.
Yeah.
Japan has actually increased, and we get our first gag with Shinzo Abe stand-in having to run to the bathroom.
They do introduce the climate change issue with the German leader introducing it.
Right, yes. Now, it's no mystery to anybody who's aware of the genre, but for anybody who isn't aware of this. So typically your foreigners in these films are English teachers, military men, or random foreigners they picked up off the street.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious in this movie. Granted, I think it was pretty obvious in World Sinks Except Japan too, but I feel like it's a little more obvious.
In some cases, it's some of the same actors.
Right.
Like our favorite President Burger.
Yes. Now, I don't know what happened, but I think his line delivery got worse.
I don't remember what he sounded, how he was talking in World Sinks, but in this film, I think he's hilarious.
Like, it's obvious, like, it really reads like he's only done acting in high school in theater. Like, the way he's so over dramatic with everything.
And you know what? I think that works. I think that makes his lines way funnier, on top of just the hilarious dialogue.
Yeah, and it does feel like this was a very it's very obvious that the people who wrote this didn't understand the structure of the other languages. Because at some points it does kind of sound like broken English. And of course that delivery just adds to it. Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting to
I think in some regards that's not entirely the writing, that's also just the line delivery for some of these actors.
I would agree. And then you also find out very quickly that any stereotype for these countries is here. As we've established, the president of the United States is President Burger, who takes charge of everything. And
I think what makes it even better is that he does nothing.
Yes.
I think that's hilarious. That like he in the typical fashion that literally every country outside of America views America. He's the big loud man boasting everything, who literally has an aircraft carrier that is, quote, called an American aircraft carrier and destroyer of world defense forces. And like they talk about using that, and then the America ends up doing absolutely nothing to help. Mm-hmm. He doesn't even come up with a single strategy.
Right. And then, like we talked about, so the Italian prime minister is named Pizza.
Yeah, Pizza no Pietro.
And like his whole thing is like pizza and Italy
and the Roman Empire.
And the Roman Empire.
Which I don't know if that actually has any basis on the real person, Romano Prodi. My best guess is just that his name is Romano, so maybe that's where they drew the connection. And obviously his background.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
I don't know if that's actually, but I did find that whole bit funny.
And then you have like the Canadian president, Prime Minister Maple Syrup Harris, you know, the name. And then like all he does is he's nice to people.
Yeah.
And he just asks for less fighting. And it's like, okay, yep, that checks off there.
We love the Canadians.
And then for Britain, you have Prime Minister Meat Pie Brightman, who ends up...
I feel like that'd be more Australian in all honesty.
Maybe. But like his whole thing is he just kind of does what America says. Like, if I remember correctly, he's the first one to agree to stay and fight.
Well, Mr. Berger and then Sarkozy.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Purely because Sarkozy wants to have an affair.
But no, like they like hit all of their marks. This I thought was a little on the nose. The Germans' solution to fight Gulala
poison gas
is gas, and I'm like, oh my god, like how?
Yeah, when I realized that, I didn't realize until I was writing it down in my notes as it was happening, and I'm like, oh.
And then of course, like Russia's solution is to bomb him.
Well, they use polonium-210, which is a real isotope that they would use to assassinate people, and they reference one of those incidents in the film.
And then is the French one is to mind control him, right?
No, that's the British.
That's the British.
The French guy isn't there. Sarkozy's
that's right.
Off on his own little adventure.
Yeah. But no, it's very interesting to just see all of the stereotypes very much here.
Yeah, he's there for his Eiffel Tower.
But as this meeting is going on, a meteorite crashes into Sapporo, where Gulala comes out.
We get our title card.
We get some Showa explosion sounds, a Rodan sound effects. And then after the explosion, we get the typical green screen fire with Gulala fading in. And then, like, the music really starts playing, and it's like, oh my god, am I listening to Akira Ifukube?
Yeah, it's very clearly taking some influence from Ifukube.
Mm-hmm. Which Kawasaki, like, that was a request from Kawasaki himself, because he wanted it to feel, if I remember correctly, united, and they even went out of their way to, like, use different instruments from all the different countries to add a little bit of layer to the concept of a united operation. Because at the end of the day, I think the idea is to come together and fight the problem.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's necessarily about the countries themselves coming together and more just the people.
The people, yes. The cultures coming together.
So, yeah. You can look at that angle. Yeah.
Now, when Gulala does appear, after we get our Ifukube music and sound effects, we start right off with just stock footage.
Yep.
From the original X from Outer Space, which is very obvious because not only is the color grading different, but it's clearly a different aspect ratio. The effects are different. Now, was there stock footage from other movies in there too for some of the building explosions?
Maybe. I wasn't entirely sure, but I definitely suspect that.
I'm specifically thinking of there is one shot in there with a building exploding that reminded me of a shot from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which was stock footage from...
is stock footage from like one of Teruyoshi Nakano's disaster movies.
Yeah, wasn't it? Was that Submersion of Japan?
No, it's like magnitude 7.9. I want to say
7.8, magnitude 7.8. I think.
Pretty sure it's that.
Yeah, and I'm like, that looks like that's just straight from that.
Yeah, I mean, any of the like really low angle shots looking up at like a single building exploding, I'm pretty sure that is stock footage from another film. I'm just not entirely sure which film exactly.
Yeah, and nowhere's like published about it either. I'm kind of surprised nobody else is like, this is clearly stock footage, right, guys?
I mean, I think people are more focused on the Gilala stock footage from X from Outer Space.
Right, which is fair. Now, that stock footage is the entirety, really, of his attack on Sapporo.
Yeah.
And then, as quickly as he shows up to attack, he turns into a giant red ball, much like Ultraman did in Ultra Operation #1 from the original show.
I mean, Gilala did this in his first movie, too.
Did he? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, like near the end of the movie, he would go into like the red ball to like move quickly to like a different city or something, or a different area.
Gotcha. And then he left, and he goes to Hokkaido. Now, the reason for that is because of the power plant in Hokkaido.
Mm-hmm.
Which, do they ever... It's just electrical, right? I don't think they establish it's nuclear or anything like that.
Not from what I recall, no.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So because of the kaiju attack, Shinzo Abe does cancel the summit. And then that's where President Berger's like, we need to stay. Now, it's not because it'll help humanity. It's not because it's the morally right thing to do as the leaders. We'll
get more support on the polls.
And then it's like, for Germany, it's, well, if I leave, they're going to think that it's because I'm a woman, so I need to stay to prove that I'm a independent, strong woman.
For the French guy, it's so he can, quote, get it on.
Right.
With the monster, he claims.
And so, not only is this film like satirizing, but it goes the extra step and does it simply because, well, they just want the benefits from killing the monster.
Yeah.
Which they don't end up killing, but they definitely are going to take the credit for it. Yeah. So following this, of course, what would happen? Press conferences. And then we get a press conference with the breakdown of the G8 summits coming together to fight the monster as a unified group of people.
I think this was actually the first scene shot as well for the movie, interestingly enough.
That wouldn't surprise me. Now, funny enough, some of the extras are like just wearing basic t-shirts.
That makes sense. That's kind of what their casting call told them. Wear like normal-ish clothes, but try to look like a reporter if you can.
Yeah.
Bring your cameras if you have any. Bring some like journals or whatever.
Also, it's important to note, talking about Ultraman, in the scene prior where we get the breakdown of everybody joining the fight to defeat Gulala, this is where we get and they are all Tokusatsu alumni actors.
Yes.
Both of Ultraman's alter egos are two of the main members.
The original Ultraman.
Yes, and Bin Furuya, which is great. And then
they even
the third
get
one
Kurobe to use the beta capsule at one point. Because he uses it as like a radio or whatever. Or like a microphone.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that happens. And, anytime I see them, I'm always happy. I love seeing specifically Susumu Kurobe and Bin Furuya.
I mean, I was happy to see Natsuki too, who is like the lead actor of Ghidorah. I was happy to see him.
Yeah, he was, he's a classic actor. Who was not in as many Godzilla films as you might think he was.
He's only in like 2 or 3.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
And in Dogora.
Mm-hmm. But after the press conference, we return to Samiri and Sanpei, and they're on the phone with their
boss,
editor-in-chief. Yes. And this is where we do get a nice little Kawasaki cameo.
And a calamari wrestler cameo.
I'd missed that. It's
on his desk. It's on his desk. There's a little calamari wrestler toy. I didn't notice it on the first time they show the boss, but I noticed it the second time, and I'm like, wait a minute. Is that?
I love that.
But yeah, this was another scene where I got GMK vibes, because the magazine, the company that these two reporters work for, Tokyo Sports, reminded me a lot of BS Digital Q from GMK, the company that Yuri works for, which is a parody of Katakawa. But I realized when I was looking it up that Tokyo Sports is actually a real magazine that was actually involved in this film.
They paid for the promotion. They were part of the production committee.
Yeah. And they are, the funny thing is, they are actually, like, in this film, they're kind of known for, like, being like one of those magazines, those sensationalist tabloid magazines, like UFOs and all that type deal, which is kind of what the real Tokyo Sports was. Interestingly enough, the first president of Tokyo Sports was actually Masaichi Nagata, the president of Daiei. who was the president because he was friends with the owner of a magazine, Yoshio Kodama, who also ran the magazine that was like the forerunner to Tokyo Sports. And yeah, this magazine in real life is kind of known for misinformation and false rumors, having a pretty poor enough reputation where all their real scoops, which is what our character's boss is looking for, all of their real scoops don't really cause much public stir. But then I found something interesting, that one of the actors in this film, Beat Takeshi, was actually a guest editor for Tokyo Sports. And so Tokyo Sports has, in 1991, they founded ever since 1991, they've had the Tokyo Sports Film Awards. And I noticed that Kitano a lot of his films kept winning a lot of awards. And the film awards for that company was started in the same year that a Kitano movie came out. So I'm like, wait a minute. Is this just like a film awards that Kitano started purely so that he could promote his film A Scene at the Sea in his future films? And I think it more or less was, because Beat Takeshi is the chairman of the jury. So he runs the awards. And there's a great quote that he said about when he established these awards. And this was after he won 3 awards: Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor. As the chairman of the jury, Takeshi said, "This is an honest award chosen by me, the person who knows best about movies. It will eventually become the most prestigious award in the Japanese film industry." So this magazine has a whole film awards section basically dedicated so that Beat Takeshi can can tell people how good his movies are. And I thought that was the funniest thing. Oh, and it's also funny because he's also criticized the magazine for literally for all their, like, a bunch of their reports just being the only thing that isn't misinformation is the date. But hey, at least in 1992, Godzilla won Best Actor, and Mothra was one of the winners for Best Supporting Actor in these awards. And in 2006, the world sinks except Japan won the Special Film Award.
See, I think that's how they got involved with this film, was because
Yeah, and I have a feeling this is also possibly how they got their link to beat Takeshi, to get him to be in this film.
See, yes, but I also think that Kawasaki and Beat Takeshi were friends.
Maybe. I don't know. That's just my theory based on this.
Based on how he talked about Beat Takeshi in an interview, it sounded a lot like they were friends prior to this.
That would be awesome. I would love for that. I hope that's true.
Also, it's important to note, and I didn't mention this until now, but now that we're talking about magazines and film directors, so one of the leading reasons why Kawasaki put his heart and soul into this one, not only was it to help keep the kaiju genre alive, and as a love letter to Akio Jisoji, who had passed away a couple years prior, and as, his first kaiju film, it was because in a magazine that had just been published not too long before production started on this, it had a list of directors, the Japanese directors of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kawasaki, by this point, had already been known in America. His films had won awards. They had been at film festivals across the globe.
This film got invited to a few.
Mm-hmm.
Venice, Sydney.
And, his films had already had U.S. releases. Some of them did. So Kawasaki was no, rando. But this magazine did not include him in the list. And he was livid. He was like, how is this a real list? I'm a film director, so I'm going to prove them wrong by making the best kaiju movie ever. When you brought up the whole magazine thing, that just popped into my head again. So I was like, I better bring that up because that's really funny.
Yeah.
So what essentially happens is, as we're talking here about Tokyo News, they say, well, get a different story than the rest. So then they have to go on a journey to figure out how to get a unique scoop. And while they go on this journey, they run into the boy they saw at the village, and he quickly runs off, but the two decide to go back to the village to see if they can find something out, because Gulala was on that.
Right, but that does
carving
happen a bit later in the film. Yeah.
But they suspect that there's something there that could possibly help.
Yeah. Although before that, they try going to the monster's path, but get blocked by a military roadblock restricting people from going through.
Also, we get the name Gulala in the scene just before this. We go back to the G8 summit where they're talking about what they can do. We hear a rundown of the plan to kill Gulala that the United States gives. And then this is a very clever joke. I like this. Out of the blue, literally out of the blue, this random kid joins.
We get a Kenny.
And we get a Kenny, he's got the hat and everything. And he's like, this creature reminds me of a Gila monster.
So let's name it Gilala.
Let's name it Gilala. And then they're like, we can't allow... And it's very clever because then they're like, you're a citizen. You're not allowed in here.
How'd you get in here?
And then he gets...
they get the guards to take him out.
as he's shouting, Gilala, Gilala, Gilala. And then not a minute later,
somebody calling him Gilala.
And they start calling... And that is a very clever joke. That is the best way I've seen the whole Kenny thing played off.
Mm-hmm. It's just a small moment, and he just appears, barging in just like a Kenny in a Gamera film would.
But he's never brought back. He's literally just there for the joke.
He's just there for the gag.
Which I think works. I do legitimately think that works here.
Yeah.
Now, after these two sequences, we get a Kawasakiism, which was not in Executive Koala, but I think it was in the Rug Cop, and that is the whole news sequence.
Oh, yeah.
Where Kawasaki historically always tries to have a sequence where there's interviews on TV
with a bunch of cameo appearances.
One of these cameos has one of the actors mention that he would have rather seen Varen or Baragon appear than Gilala, which I think this film, and this is why I didn't like it as a kid. It was like, why are they mentioning Godzilla characters like they exist or that they're a movie? Like, it's really stupid, right? But watching it now, I will say I'm a little less like, how dare you break the fourth wall here? Like, this is blasphemy. That is one thing I've definitely moved on from, which is, I think, a win. But it is kind of humorous to see that scene specifically.
Yeah, and then Lily Frankie shows up, and the whole environmentalist theme kind of comes back in.
Right.
With him believing that the monster's destruction is honestly probably better than humanity destroying the planet through capitalism and with climate change. And then the third person scene who's just talking about how incredible Gilala is actually an actor who unfortunately would pass away before this movie would come out.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Haruo Mizuno, who was a film critic, TV person, and also film director. This was his last real appearance, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
He passed about a month before the film.
Now, following this, we go to an explanation that Gilala is approaching Mount Showa, right?
We also get the backstory for Gilala's appearance,
yes,
which essentially reveals that it's more or less a similar situation to the X from outer space, with Gilala spores sticking to like a space probe, except this time it's a probe from China, leading to some jokes about world leaders all just blaming China.
Which is oddly specific and oddly relevant still to this day.
And I think that's what makes it funny.
I will say this film somehow, it's not somehow, it's obvious because humanity never changes. It's very fun to see how this film
has aged very well.
It has aged very well.
Oh, and also this is explained by the lead actor of X from Outer Space, who plays a character of the same name in this film, Dr. Sano.
Right. Which is, I think that's a really fun...
I didn't pick up on it until I was researching. I'm like, oh.
Mm-hmm. And this is where we learn about Mount Showa, which people say it's a fictional place, but Rex, it's real, right?
Yes. I wonder who was just saying that it was a fictional place in an outtake. Yeah, Mount Showa, or the Showa Shinzan, is a real place in Hokkaido where this film is set.
See, I didn't know that. That's actually really interesting and kind of a cool, like, double-edged, like, reference there.
I mean, I imagine they chose the place because it's in Hokkaido and Showa.
Right, exactly. Like, it's obvious, but it's also just cool that, like, they were able to make that decision, right? Now, back with our two journalists, they make it back to the village where they identify now that Gulala is on the carving of that temple fighting something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, they don't go back to the village until a bit later once the world leaders have gone through a few of their plans. They're more just at the moment following the monster until they realize, until the Sumire, the lead lady, remembers that she saw Gilala on one of the temple's buildings.
Yeah, and also during this time, Gulala does get to the Norubetsu power plant.
Yes.
And absorbs all of its energy. Now, here we also get the setup for the first of multiple attempts to take down Gulala.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is a Japanese setup plan. After the plan to attack it in the Pacific doesn't go through because they learn that it's going to go to the power source and not over the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan is to set up an earthquake generator, sounds like Dune 2 all of a sudden, to get Gulala up to the volcano and then hit him with the super missile to blow him up.
Yeah.
As you would expect, they do this, it doesn't work out, and the forces get wiped out.
Yeah.
Now, while they're doing this, I'm pretty sure they accidentally peak the mic at one point with one of the military guys. I'm 99% sure I heard a peak.
I think they might have. I like the whole joke with... It's not really a joke, more just another commentary, I guess, on just they're risking setting off an earthquake for the short-term goal of luring Gilala.
Right.
Which they don't even know if their plan will work. And constantly throughout the film, like, their short-sightedness leads to Gilala just becoming more and more ferocious.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up making the problem worse.
Yeah.
Adding to that global warming angle of the film.
Yeah, because, I mean, that whole thought is, Gulala in a way is global warming, and everything that we're doing is actually just making it worse, like you said, yeah. Now, I will say, so after this, it becomes a gag that every country comes up with their own way to attack Gulala.
Yeah.
Also, during all of this, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is replaced by Prime Minister Oizumi.
Mm-hmm. Based on the real Prime Minister prior to Abe, Koizumi. And it's worth noting as well that both the actors whom play the Japanese Prime Ministers in this film are played by members of a comedy group called The Newspaper, whom often did political skits similar to this, where the respective actors who play Abe and Koizumi in this film would often parody Abe and Koizumi on television.
I'm also pretty sure I heard that they also did Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
And Trump, yeah, and a few other political leaders, yeah. I mean, there's like there's 3 members in this film, but there's like a bunch of others in the actual group.
Mm-hmm. See, this movie makes me want to see them do a sequel in a way of like a meeting in Japan, but it's with Donald Trump.
I have to show you later. I'll have to show you the clip of Beat Takeshi. I'll have to show you Beat Takeshi dressed up on national Japanese television as Donald Trump.
Because quite honestly, I would love to see what the greatest American president, according to the polls. It's true. Everybody loves me. I'm the greatest president in the history of the world.
Honestly, Beat Takeshi doesn't sound too dissimilar from Donald Trump in his voice.
See, but I would legit, no joke, I would love to see that happen. I think that would be hilarious.
I mean, I'm not against the idea.
Let Boris Johnson, Shinzo Abe, Donald Trump parodies in a kaiju movie.
Oh boy.
That's the triad right there. That's it. Why am I still talking like him? I don't know.
Bro just transitioned into that voice there.
Sometimes it happens, man.
Uncontrollable urges.
Now, so getting back into the film here, Koizumi suggests using nuclear weapons during all of this.
Yeah. And everyone's like, what? Are you mad? Bear in mind, this is also after the German leader is breaking international code with chemical warfare.
Right. And that's all after the Russians try to hit it with the super weapon.
Yeah.
Of a missile.
Or not a missile, but the poison.
Right.
And then Italy tries to drop Gilala in a hole, King Kong vs. Godzilla style.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so this is where my biggest problem with this film comes up.
Oh.
Everything we just said takes 20 minutes to do. it's not like Final War style where they quickly like cut it up and they're just like, man, that didn't work. Dang it. Because they have to go through with the gag of like replacing the project strategy title in the hallway. They go through with like setting it up and it happening and it failing. And then another one's like, well, let me do it. I'll get it done. And then we go through the same thing. And this happens quite a few times.
Yeah.
And it's a 20-minute, it's roughly a 15 to 20 minute segment of this film. And I lose all interest. I lose all, like, I'm out. It's a similar complaint to what I have with Shin Ultraman in that regards of like, you know, we have Zeiram and then we have Mephiles, one after another in the story and the plot. And those stories are so similar that it's like, I just watched this. I don't want to see it again. If they spread those out throughout the film and it wasn't just one after another, feeling like we're just repeating.
It's not really one after. It is, but it isn't, because the film does intersperse like within each of these sections, like our reporter characters as well as a subplot with the French leader, who's off on his own little date.
But
with one of his interpreters.
But
I definitely think you could make this more efficient. I definitely think like you could do like either do maybe a montage or maybe cut down some of like the leaders just explaining the plan, I guess, maybe. I definitely think you could make it shorter and less repetitive.
And see, my whole thing is, even though it does have, like, when we get to the G8 scenes, they are just the same thing, right? So even though it does have moments with the French leader and our two journalists, which I'll make a complaint about that here in a second, we still get the same things with them. So when we cut back to them, it's what we just saw before, but it's a different strategy. Mm-hmm. And because we know the film ends in a fight, we're like, okay, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. This is like, it is a constant issue.
Right.
And to now go and talk about the other two plots, honestly, you could cut half of the French president's plot, and I think it would be fine. I think a lot of the stuff in the middle here could just be cut.
I mean, they don't really spend too much time on him. I think they
don't.
They spend like just enough time that just really all the time that's needed to get in a few jokes and just establish everything that's going on with it.
But because
I don't think they really waste time with him.
But because it's dispersed like it is, it feels like it goes on for too long. Because of the repetitive nature of the super weapons from the world leaders. And I think that's the biggest issue.
He disappears for like a good 20, 25 minutes of the film, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So like it doesn't... It's like... I don't know. It's just like you cut back to this subplot every now and again rather than necessarily having it just be stretched. Like having it just take up too much of the film. You just cut back to it when it's appropriate for it to cut back to.
But they only cut back to it when they need to take a break from the repetitive stuff.
Sure.
And perhaps if they did a little less of that and just had it like at the beginning and at the end of the montage, it would work a little bit better because it wouldn't feel as drawn out. But because we have this 15 to 20 minute section of the film, that just feels like we go from random thing our other four characters are doing back to the G8 summit, back to one of the four characters, back to the G8 summit. It makes those scenes intercut between the G8 scenes feel drawn out, feel like we're just moving along because we gotta pad the runtime. We gotta add to this.
Yeah. I definitely felt they could have shortened that a bit. Yeah.
Now, like I said, I think it's really funny. I don't know if funny is the right word. Maybe ironic about the whole Germany is using gas to solve the problem. Germany is, they're used to cleaning up Russia's messes. At the end of the day, when the British try to control the problem, it becomes a bigger problem,
Mm-hmm. Hell, we even get a she pose.
Mm-hmm. I just found that whole section redundant. Mm. I wouldn't mind like a quick cut, like Final Wars-esque, where it's the Japanese one. It doesn't work. They're like, next one happens. It fails. Next.
Yeah,
like,
I definitely think
segment.
Think it could work better as like some sort of like short montage or just like that Final Wars style.
So, and like if you cut out 15 minutes of that would reduce the runtime to about an hour and 17 minutes. Maybe even less, because you could do a little more cutting and editing, I think. Because the other subplots wouldn't.
With the credits is about almost exactly an hour 40. I definitely think it would be, I think it should be about an hour 20. I think that would,
I agree,
be a much better paced story. In there, you're in and you're out. Yeah, I feel like this story doesn't really demand much longer than that.
Yes.
I think that's be the perfect runtime for this.
And, that's one thing. Kawasaki can do that. A lot of his films are 70 to 80 minutes, maybe 90 minutes long. For the most part, he doesn't do these long, drawn-out stories.
Mm-hmm. Although I would say that some of them do feel like they... I think that Kawasaki films do consistently have a bit of, like, fluff in them. Like, a bit that I would personally remove to shorten the runtime.
I agree.
I think all of them have a bit of that.
But most of the time, it is only like 5-ish minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's a lot less than this film, because this film really draws it out.
Yeah, but I wasn't really bothered by it in this film. I
lost all interest.
I was less bothered by it in this film. I honestly thought it was more annoying in like Executive Koala, because it just felt like the movie was just throwing at the wall and seeing what would stick, and then nothing would stick for more than 10 minutes. So I just got kind of I got tired of that.
I didn't get tired with this film. I just lost interest. And honestly, like, it was kind of hard to gain interest again until the scene where they awaken Takemajin.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, I think the film has a great wake-up call when they go to reporters go back to the village and talk to one of the villagers who reveals the prophecy of like how the world would get destroyed by Gilala, but then the warrior Takemajin will essentially defend against Gilala. And then the reporter lady just imagines Beat Takeshi's face onto like Yamato Takeru fighting Orochi.
Now, like, I will say that was kind of funny. And then we also get the whole backstory to the kid and how, because of his father dying and saying to believe in Takemajin, that he's a strong believer. But the conclusion of this scene does feel a little like, okay, like, I guess I can follow with this. It just kind of feels there, which is by the end of this whole interaction they have, she refuses to leave and joins in on the song.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't feel earned. I'm going to say earned for the lack of a better term. It just feels like it's there to move the plot. like to get them back to the whole performing the Takemajin dance and ritual to get him to awaken.
I mean, it's also going kind of a little bit playing into that environmentalist and anti-capitalist theme as well, when she like talks about how like you villagers, you respect nature, you help each other, you never lose a sense of gratitude in your God, which compared to like all the people who were shown earlier in the film exploiting Gilala for, you know, obviously the G8 leaders want to kill him for their own glory and gain. But then there's also people selling Gilala merchandise to capitalize off the destruction. So once again, the film is kind of playing into that angle of it.
Right. Yeah. Because that is true, because
it's a bit
does
on
kind
the
of have...
nose, but I think it works.
Yeah. But one thing I will say, and this is kind of backtracking a little bit, I do think right before this, the film does start to go a little off the rails, into the very heavy, like, this film isn't as serious, which it does devolve into that, I would say. It pulls a Godzilla Kong the New Empire and has kind of the wackiness at the end, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, I'd say. Before we get this scene, we do see Gulala laughing because of the gas.
Yeah.
And then he starts dancing.
Yeah, where he does the she pose.
Which, you know, for me was kind of like, okay. You know, it's obviously falling into that parody, really hot and heavy there, which I'm not the hugest fan of. It's you know, that comes back to the whole, what do you prefer in your film? What do you not prefer? And for me, that was where it was starting to be like, okay, so this film's starting to get a little too wacky for my taste. And then I do feel like it continues to kind of spiral from there.
Yeah, I can agree with that to an extent, but I honestly, I enjoyed it because it kind of felt like probably the most it felt like, for a intentionally wacky kaiju parody film, it felt like it was probably the most earnest in its love for Showa era kaiju films.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not only is it bringing back Gilala, it's got the tokusatsu effects, but in general, this film feels like there's a reverence for a lot of the Showa era Godzilla, Ultraman, and all that. So it felt more, the wackiness felt more earned in this film than, say, something like GXK, which is kind of just trying to superficially emulate, like, whoa, this is ridiculous, just like Godzilla vs. Megalon was. Right. Like, there's still a serious kaiju story in this film, in spite of all the ridiculousness. And it's still, the film has themes that have been, it's tackling themes that the genre has tackled before in a new modern lens with its whole global warming angle.
Right.
Which I think is what, I think that's why it worked for me.
See, and I will agree to the point of, it does feel more earnest. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're doing this just to be like absolutely bonkers, right? Because up until this point, the film, I think, has been pretty, I mean, there's obvious jokes and obvious satire.
There's a lot of jokes, but you can take you could honestly play a lot of the film fairly straight.
Yes.
Like, if the jokes don't land on for you, then I think the film can still somewhat work. Not entirely. There's still things like some of the line deliveries from the world leaders, or most of the line deliveries. But you can take this story seriously and enjoy it without the enjoyments of the jokes.
Mm-hmm. And so I will give it that, because it isn't being Godzilla versus Megalon for the nuance.
And one thing that I did also appreciate, it feels less try hard with the humor than some of Kawasaki's other films.
Yes.
It does still have a little bit of that, but the humor is less in your face, please laugh.
Mm-hmm. It's a little more dry and kind of to the point.
Yeah.
But I think that adds to the whole concept of, I wouldn't necessarily put this as a comedy movie.
I would put it as a satire.
Yes. A lot like King Kong versus Godzilla. That is,
or even World Sinks Except Japan, which was a similar situation to this, where it's less a comedy, more just a satire.
Because there is a difference. Because, comedies are meant to be humorous, whereas satires are meant to be ironic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can still have a comedy that is a satire. Like, they're not mutually exclusive. And this film definitely has comedic elements, no doubt.
Right.
But it definitely falls in line more with being a satire rather than just a straight-up comedy.
Right. Which is what most of Kawasaki's films are. So this is one of those rare outliers that is kind of that breath of fresh air in those regards.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about kind of the wackiness, we do get the final attempt by our world leaders is from Britain to brainwash Gilala, which ruins his brain.
Yeah,
and he just starts going crazy.
Again, everything they do ends up making him stronger and more ferocious.
And then we get Koizumi revealing that he's, quote, the leader of the North, end quote.
Yeah, stealing the gag from World Sinks Except Japan, where he pulls his face off.
and for anybody who doesn't get what that means, Kim Jong-un is back at it again. Now, I should say this. I love it when he brings Kim Jong-un into these stories because it's so left field.
It's literally the exact same joke, but it's just as funny.
Yes. Also, in an interview, he said he was kind of afraid to do it again because he was already worried the first time that they were going to kidnap him and take him to Korea because he knew about the Kenpachiro Satsuma story. So he was like, I hope they don't steal me and I go work in North Korea. Because he was like, and they're definitely film buffs. They're definitely otaku. Like they watch movies. So they probably have seen my movie. This is also where we find out that all the translators are actually spies and they all have weapons and they take everybody hostage. And then this is also where we get the plan from Kim that they're going to launch a nuclear warhead at him to destroy him, which leads to an interesting situation after this. So during all of this, the president of France is in bed with the translator, and then that's when she
reveals that she's actually Korean.
From the north.
Yes.
And that there's a secret plan to take control of the G8 summit and take everybody hostage.
He's like, what?
Which I guess this means in a way that the French president's the best out of all of them because he goes back to save everybody.
I mean, he's the hero essentially.
Yeah.
For the world
leaders.
And
the way he does it is he goes back. I mean, he brings reinforcements.
Yeah.
And he flashes everybody. Which gives
he's just shirtless, wearing a towel. And it's just like, surprise.
And he flashes everybody, and then all the Japanese reinforcements come in and take everybody hostage.
Get everyone out of their hostage situation and capture all the North Korean agents.
Yes. And then the American president slow walks over to Kim and takes his red button and is like, I got you now. Like, you're not going to drop this bomb. And then he's like, I planned for this the whole time. And then he and then he knocks his glasses down, and we find out that that's actually the
real switch.
The real switch, which is found out by a Japanese, not the president. He's just standing there, menacingly. So then the nuclear missile's launched, but Dr. Sano comes over again and talks about how he's learned more about Gulala's spores and how all of the weapons have made him stronger, and that with this puny missile, like, they go and, like, just rip into the North Koreans' weaponry, and they're like, this weak weapon, this excuse for a warhead, if it hits Gulala, it will blow him into a billion pieces, and he will spread. Now, I see it both as a reference to the X from outer space, but also the War of the Gargantuas, with the idea of you blow them up, there will be more that come.
Yeah.
Now, we go back to the Takemajin ceremony, where everybody is doing the dance, and we get shots of the Takemajin statue, which I noticed here. Why is he holding an umbrella and a fire extinguisher?
I don't know. I just know that's the joke.
Yeah. So they do their dance. I will say, unlike the Showa Godzilla films, this does not overstay its welcome.
Yeah.
But I also think it's because it's catchy enough that it doesn't overstay some of them. Now, the military shows up and is like, there's a nuclear missile coming, everybody needs to evacuate. And so they take all the villagers, but we see Takemajin preparing to transform, which we hear some Ultraman transforming sound effects. And just as the missile slowly makes its way over to Gulala, out of the blue, Takemajin just
appears
and takes it up the butt.
Yeah. Now, Takemajin is a giant Majin, very clearly based off Beat Takeshi, but sadly, due to the suit's weight and Beat Takeshi's age, in the suit test, they realized he was not going to be able to do the suit performance for Takemajin, which is sad.
So instead, they got veteran suit actor Hurricane Ryu.
Oh, no, Hurricane Ryu plays Gulala.
Oh, that's right. They got another suit actor who doesn't have any other credits to play Takemajin. Now, originally the plan... Yes. Now, originally the plan was to paint the face and have it be a real-life face, but that proved to not work, so instead they created an actual face mask, like in the Showa era they would.
What's the idea to have Beat Takeshi's Beat Takeshi's actual face there? Okay. Oh,
which explains which explains the whole visions of him writing Orochi and all that.
I mean, it's still very clearly meant to be Beat Takeshi's face.
Yes.
It's a bit exaggerated, but you can tell it's Beat Takeshi.
And so after the missile explodes in his butt, he then fights Gulala, which during this fight, his other 8 limbs just disappear.
Yep.
At random points.
I mean, they only show back up at the end once when he uses one as a pseudo ice slugger.
Which I love. Now, I will say this fight takes a long time.
No, this fight's a blast. It's only it's 5 minutes, I'd say.
It feels longer. I enjoy Takemajin. I think he's the
I love Beat Takeshi, so having a giant Beat Takeshi fight Gulala is possibly the best way you could end a movie. So I cannot fault anything about the scene, even when his arms disappear. I just can't fault that.
During all of this, we get obvious reaction shots from the G8 summit and our other characters, and everybody's just watching as Takemajin beats up Gilala. And like you said, the end has I didn't take it as an eye slugger, and I took it more as that blue blade that the original Ultraman.
Oh yeah. It could have been that as well, actually, yeah. I just thought of the eye slugger because, like, I mean, it's a 7-star decapitation and also rug top.
Right. But yes, it's an energy attack that cuts Gilala's head off, and then in true Ultraman fashion, it explodes right after. And then after this, Takemajin returns to his shrine to sleep again until who knows what. Back at the G8 summit, Kim Jong-un has once again disappeared. But the rest of the G8 summit leaders, they're like, we need to get back to the meeting. But first, let's all go bathe in the hot springs.
Even Abe shows back up.
And Abe shows back up after everything. And he's like, I'm ready to help. And it's like, well, it's over.
The French leader accidentally flashes everyone again.
Yeah. Now, it is important to say, so I don't know, so what I'm about to say might have been more of a joke, but Minoru Kawasaki did want to do a third Earth destruction film that had Kim Jong-un appear. That's kind of the connective tissue is Kim Jong-un. But he also had a couple of other ideas, spin-off ideas, one of them being Takemajin Hiroshima Death Battle Edition, Takemajin Return to the North, which I imagine would have been him going to North Korea, and Takemajin Junjo Edition. I kind of like the idea of like a Takemajin trilogy.
I love that idea. I wish that happened.
I would love to see something like that.
I would kill for more Beat Takeshi, giant Beat Takeshi action.
That would have been awesome to see. Now, I don't know if Kim Jong-un appears in Earth Defense Widow.
I don't think he does, no.
So I imagine that automatically means that one does not count.
Yeah.
Because there is no Kim Jong-un.
I don't know what other film could be a contender potentially for what if there is a third film that did come out.
See, I don't think there was. And the reason for that is because after this, like, everybody just goes home, everybody's happy, credits roll, right?
Yeah.
We get a subpar song that I don't think was very memorable.
Yeah.
The film, like, bombed. It did not do well at the box office. Come to find out, they were like, well, we hope it does well in the foreign distribution. Now, while like you said, it did get shown off at some film festivals.
It didn't really get a good response.
It didn't get a good response, and it only got a DVD release a couple years later in America, and that was it. So, needless to say, this film did not do well, and it ended up losing money for everybody involved. And what sucks is now nobody can figure out who has the rights to this movie. Even though I feel like it should be obviously Shochiku.
Right.
But Media Blasters tried to get it to release it on Blu-ray, and they couldn't because they couldn't locate who had the rights to the film. So they can't even make money now because they can't figure out who has the rights. Is it Minoru Kawasaki and Rivertop Films? Is it Tornado Films? Is it Shochiku? Like, who is it? I'm sure, like, if somebody just put in a little bit more effort, it could be figured out, but the fact that it is a copyright conundrum is a little disheartening.
Yeah, with Gilala's last appearance being a job site commercial, if I remember correctly.
Where Gulala plays a tiny little monster. Now, a couple things I had here. Morishita Yuri, who was the translator that slept with the French president, actually spoke fluent French.
She speaks French in the film pretty well.
Yes. but originally she was planned to be dubbed over, but because she spoke fluent French, they didn't have to dub her over. However, Ingo, the actor for the French president, didn't speak French, so he had to be dubbed over, which is very obvious in the film. And then, interestingly enough, and I would love to see something like this happen, because since this came out, Minoru Kawasaki has rebooted Planet Prince. He has rebooted Moonlight Mask and Roboman. So he has rebooted characters, right? Mm-hmm. He expressed a lot of interest in rebooting Aegon, the Atomic Dragon, or even Marin Kong, which I'd love to see something like that happen. I'd love to see a Kawasaki Aegon movie. Mm-hmm. Now, with that, I've kind of hit all of my points. I just have my final thoughts. So before we go into that, Rex, do you have any final notes, final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, no, I went in with tempered expectations with this film, based on the track record of Kawasaki's previous kaiju outings being my least favorite of his films, and also your previous hatred of this film, and just the general mixed to very negative reception in most of the rest of the kaiju fandom. I was kind of expecting to have pretty much the same opinion of this as I did like Kaiju Mono, but I ended up enjoying this far more than, say, Kaiju Mono or Monster Seafood Wars. I actually had a pretty good time watching this film, which was a legitimately pleasant surprise.
Mm-hmm. See, for me, I mean, I didn't hate it. I will say that I didn't hate it. I actually liked it a lot more than I remembered. But I will say that 15 to 20 minute mark in the middle part of the film really drags the film down.
I don't know. I definitely noticed that it was going a bit long, but it didn't bother me as much as in other Kawasaki films when they drag.
It bothered me, especially with, my whole thing is, during all of those scenes, like after Gilala's initial attack and before that final fight, he's just kind of wandering the countryside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could. Yeah, it is a bit disappointing that they clearly didn't have enough of a budget to do any city destruction outside of the stock footage. That is legitimately a shame.
And because of that, honestly, Gilala just in the countryside is probably some of the most boring indie kaiju stuff I've seen. Because he's just there. And the thing about it is, especially in that 15 to 20 minute segment, all he does is he just tanks everything. He just kind of moves on. He keeps going. There's not a lot really to do with him. He's just there. I think the Takemajin fight sequence saves a lot of that. It definitely doesn't make the film boring at the end, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything up to that point was not boring. In a way, at some points, it doesn't feel like it was meant to be a kaiju film. Now, we know it always was, but for me, I have some really huge suspicion that they took the World Sinks Except Japan script and just modified it. I mean, it's obviously a rewrite entirely, but it does feel like it hits all those same basic beats. Which, I mean, props to them. Like, that's Kawasaki's best film that I've seen. The World Sinks Except Japan. I don't understand why people don't like that movie. That is such a brilliant film. But the best parts of this film are Takemajin, and I love the score because it's got a lot of heart to it. It has the heart of the Showa era, and I appreciate that.
Oh, that's another thing that makes it feel even more like an earnest Showa kaiju tribute than most other films.
It is the proper way to do a Ifukube-inspired score.
Yeah.
Now, the comedy, I think, is great in terms of the satire.
I think this is Kawasaki's most consistently funny film.
Yes. I just wish that they could have cut that 15 to 20 segment. And I honestly, I would have rather them do a legitimate like spiritual successor, like that's got some connections.
What do you mean by that? And like the sun connections?
Acknowledge the X from outer space.
I mean, they kind of do. But
they also make it very clear that this is a new, like it's not in that same.
Sure, but I don't know if making it an actual direct sequel really would improve anything about the film in my eyes.
I just think that would have been a nice addition.
I don't know. I think the way they handle it in the actual film, I think that works just as well as making it an actual sequel.
See, even if it was just a one-liner, like, "Oh, we've seen a monster like this before," like that's really all I would. I mean,
the thing, I don't know. I feel like the way they do it in the film works better than just like implying it's a sequel by like, you know, having it's obviously not a direct sequel, but like the events that led up to Gilala's attack is a loose retelling, a loose version of the events of the original. Plus, you've got the original actor here. You've got that little, like, those little tributes to the original film. So I don't think actually making it like a sequel and just having like a line or two confirming that really does that any better than how the film already is handling it.
I don't know. It doesn't ruin, like, I'm not saying it ruins the film, but I think it just would have been a nice little addition,
I guess,
to the grandiose of the film,
I guess.
So, Rex, do you have any more final thoughts?
Not that I can recall or haven't already written down or haven't already spoken about, I think.
Then, if you're ready, I'm going to go ahead and do our cast and crew because it's going to take me a second to do it all.
Go straight ahead.
In our cast, we have Natsuki Kato, who played Sumaida Sumari, who was in Eko Eko Azaraku, Stacy, Attack of the Schoolgirl Zombies, Kamen Rider Ryuki Final, Battle Royale 2, Red Tears. Kazuki Kaito, who plays Sanpei Toyama, was in Kamen Rider Kabuto, Kamen Rider Kabuto the movie, Kamen Rider the Next, Kamen Rider Kabuto the game. As former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, you had Hide Fukumoto. As former Prime Minister Junzabaru Koizumi, you had Akira Matsushita. John Hesse played President Berger, who was also in The World Sinks Except Japan. Anatoly Krasnov, who played President Putin, was a voice actor in Devilman Crybaby. Inge Murata, who played President Angelica Lovrembers, was in Ultraman Cosmos vs. Ultraman Justice. Silver Mask, Shin Godzilla, The Great Buddha Arrival, and is going to be in the upcoming film Kaiju Island of Fire. Petro Cristo, who played Prime Minister Maple Syrup Harris. Roberto Colasatani played Prime Minister Pizzanoi Petro. Wayne Dooster played Prime Minister Meat Pie Britman, was in Genkiso Sentai Kato Ranger and Silver Mask. Ingo played President Escalaguo Sorokozi, was in The World Sinks Except Japan, 20th Century Boys 2, Last Hope, and Zebraman 2, Attack on Zebra City. Ziko Uchiyama, who played President of the North, was in Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, Tokyo Fist, another film by Shinya Tsukamoto, Moon Over Tau, Ju-on 2, The Grudge, The World Sinks Except Japan, and Mahu Sentai Maga Ranger. Hurricane Ryu, who was Gulala's suit actor, did manga called Let's Go Zukoki Sentai, Godzilla Monster Warrior, Giant Monster Gamera, and did the books Godzilla Monster Super Quiz. He also was the suit actor in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Mecha Droid Robokill Underneath Disco Club Layla, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Godzilla vs. Mecha Godzilla 2, Godzilla vs. Destroya, UFO Daidsakusen, Iko-chan, Earth Defense Widow, Kaiju Mono, Monster Seafood Wars, and Adventure Godzillaland. Yuichi Okuda played Take Majin as the suit actor. Kunimoto Shoken played Captain Soma, was in Red Shadow, The Happiness of the Katakuris, Goemon, Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, and the television series for the Slit-Mouthed Woman. Akitoshi Otaki played Captain Miyake, who was in The Man Who Wanted to Be Ultraman, Heisei Ultra 7, Ultraman Tiga, Ultraman Dyna, Ultra Q Dark Fantasy, Ultraman Mebius, Ballad, the Takashi Miike film, or not Miike, Takashi Yamazaki film, and Ultraman Tiga Gaiden. Junichi Inoue, who played the editor-in-chief, was in Moonlight Mask from 1981. Jun Mura was in Gehara, the long dark-haired monster, and the Great Buddha Arrival. Lily Frankie was in Mysterious Ghost Snack Attack, As the Gods Will, The New Legend of the Stardust Brothers, and Shoplifters. You had Haruo Mizuno, who was in the film, Toshio Wasaki, who was Dr. Sano, was in Ghost Story of Oewa, The X from Outer Space, Mirror Man, Jumborg Ace, and Tora Tora Tora. Masami Hirochi, who played Dr. Fukuyami, was in Ultraman 80, Ultraman Tiga, Ultraman Dyna, Ultraman Gaia, Ultraman Nexus, Shin Ultraman, Uzumaki, The Rug Cop, Silver Mask, Earth Defense Widow, Kaiju Mono, Monster Seafood Wars, Denace the Final, Help My Mother, Denace, and Fukushima 50. Eiichi Kikuchi, who was the village mayor, was in Kaiju Buska, Space Giants, Ninja Unit Gecko, Lightspeed Esper, Mr. Comet, Monster Prince, Ultra 7, The Return of Ultraman, Ultraman Ace, Ultraman Taro, Sukeban Detective 2, Kamen Rider Black RX, Google 5, the movie, The Calamari Wrestler, Executive Koala, The Rug Cop, High School Girl Rika vs. Zombies, Karate Robo Zamborger, Earth Defense Widow, Outer Man, Kaiju Mono, Monster Seafood Wars, Planet Prince 2021. Hirohisa Nakata, who played Priest Morikama, was in Golden Bat, Captain Ultra, Kamen Rider Amazon, Message from Space, Super Denshin Bioman, and the movie, Godzilla vs. Biollante, The Calamari Wrestler, The World Sinks Except Japan, Great Zubat, Robot 110, Message from Space Galactic Wars, and Space Sheriff Gavin. Bin Furuya played Officer Takamine, was in Mothra, The Last War, Gorath, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Invasion of Astro Monster, High and Low, Atragon Dogora, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, The War of the Gargantuas. Susumu Kurobe played Officer Kimura, was in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Son of Godzilla, All Monsters Attack, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Ultraman, Return of Ultraman, Ultraman Tara, Ultraman Leo, Ultraman Max, The Man Who Created Ultraman, Ultraman Mebius, Space Iron Man Kyodine, Kamen Rider Black, New Ultraman Retsuden, Ultra Q, Monster Legends, Ultraman Mebius, Gaiden, Ghost Reverse, Ultraman Zero Gaiden, Killer the Beatstar. Yotsuke Natsuki, who played director Naruyumi, was in The H-Man, Yojimbo, Dogora, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, The Return of Godzilla, and Ultra 7X. Beat Takeshi, who played Takemajin's voice, directed the film Zatoichi from 2003, and was an actor in...
Which actually shared a filming location with this film.
Really?
Yeah, the village. They filmed I want to say the tap dance scene in Takeshi's Zatoichi film. And actually, funnily enough, when this film premiered at the Venice International Film Festival, it was shown right after Beat Takeshi's most recent film at the time, Achilles and the Tortoise.
Interesting. So Beat Takeshi was also an actor in Battle Royale 2, Izo, and the 2017 U.S. adaptation of Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, among many other movies and television appearances of the Count.
Yeah. As for your crew, you have Minoru Kawasaki as the director, co-writer, co-producer, and an actor. His co-writer was Masaman Megita, who worked on Ultraman Company, Ultraman Tiga, The Final Odyssey, The Calamari Wrestler, Goalkeeper Crab, Everything Sinks Except Japan, Death Kappa, Executive Koala, Earth Defense Widow, Outer Man, Monster Seafood Wars, Heisei Ultra 7, Busca Busca, Ultra Q Dark Fantasy, Ultraman Neos. He was an actor in Heisei Ultra 7, Ultraman Dyna, Ultraman Gaia, Busca Busca, Mirai Sentai Time Ranger, Ultraman Cosmos, Ultra Q Dark Fantasy, and Ultraman Tiga The Final Odyssey. Your composer was Hirohiko Fukuda, who worked on Robo Geisha, Karate Robo Zemborger, Zombie Ass, Toilet of the Dead, Death Sushi, ABCs of Death, Hell Driver, which he acted in too, Neo Ultra Q, Attack on Titan, Fire at Counterattack, Ultra Monster Palace, and then he was also in the game PD Ultraman Battle Collector 64. And finally, for your producers, you have Shinobi Suzuki, Shintaro Kane, who worked on The Calamari Wrestler, The Rug Cop, The World Sinks Except Japan, and did the Japanese distribution for Queen Kong. Masanobu Suzuki, who also worked on The World Sinks Except Japan and Silver Mask, and finally Koichi Shiroda as producer. Oh boy, I'm done reading off names and titles.
As you should be.
Now, there is one last thing we got to do before we can wrap this up, Rex, and I think you know what it is.
Would it happen to be our rankings?
Yes. Now, after we do our Kawasaki, I want us to do our ranking for the Gilala duology, on which we prefer over the other.
Well, that's going to be very quick, I imagine.
It'll be very quick. But we're going to start with Kawasaki's filmography that we've covered.
Okay.
Rex, you always have the honor. Start us off at the bottom of our list, and we'll go up.
How lucky am I? Well, I'm going to start at number 7, Monster Seafood Wars.
See, and for my number 7, I have Kaiju Mono.
Mm-hmm. See, I have that at number 6.
And I have Monster Seafood Wars at number 6.
I think both spots is fair for those films. Above that, I believe we both share Executive Koala at number 5.
Yes. Executive Koala is my number 5.
What do you have for number 4?
So for number 4, I have Monster X Strikes Back Attack the G8 Summit.
Oh, that's interesting, because I have The World Sinks Except Japan.
I hate that. Admittedly, before our conversation, I had Monster X Strikes Back below Executive Koala. But in our conversation, I kind of realized that I was probably a little too harsh on my ranking, so it got bumped up, but it couldn't beat my number 4 or number 3.
And what is your number 3?
My number 3 is The Calamari Wrestler.
I'm going to have to agree. Calamari Wrestler at number 3 for me.
See, I think I know what your number 2 is.
Okay. What do you think it is?
I think you're going to say Monster X Strikes Back Attack the G8 Summit.
Well, I'm going to have to surprise you and put The Rug Cop at number 2.
Really?
Yes.
So I share that. I have The Rug Cop at my number 2.
I think it's very interesting what we have. Our number 1 and number 4 picks.
I do too.
Are exactly reversed.
So your number 1 is this movie?
Yes.
My number 1's The World Sinks Except Japan.
See, I think everything that makes you enjoy World Sinks Except Japan is kind of why I enjoyed this film. The difference is that I found this more consistently entertaining than The World Sinks Except Japan. I think World Sinks Except Japan kind of lost my engagement at multiple points in the film. So that's why it's a bit lower for me.
See, for me, it's The World Sinks Except Japan kind of flows a little bit better, and it's a little less of a undertaking to watch it in its entirety.
See, I never felt like this was an undertaking. I was consistently like, I could feel the pacing issues, but they didn't bug me. Unlike some of Kawasaki's other films, I was not bothered by them.
See, I would have to say, like, the only way that this film would go up is if it cut that 15 minutes out. I need 15 minutes cut from this film, and then I say I'd probably have it higher.
But hey, it's good to see that it's gone from seemingly the bottom of the barrel to number 4 for you. That is an improvement.
If we're going to use the terms of the people these days, it's a pretty mid film, bruh.
Oh, Jesus.
It finna be pretty mid, bruh.
Never speak like that again.
Bruh.
You should never sound as old as you are. You of all people.
So, with that, we have one more ranking, and I think we're going to agree on this, and then we're going to dive into the most noblest of podcasting traditions.
So, for our X from Outer Space and Monster X Strikes Back ranking, what do you have at number 2?
Well, let's say our number 2 at the same time.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. The X from Outer Space. Okay. And number 1's Monster X. So we agree that this film is better than the original.
Yeah, but I did not particularly like the original, so...
No, and anybody who is here, I highly recommend you go listen to that, because I feel like we went pretty in depth on kind of the weirdness of that movie. Not necessarily not necessarily that the film is weird like most people say it is, but just how it's staged and how it's set up.
Right. And then some of the weirdness with the ending as well.
Yes. So I would highly recommend anybody go listen to that. And if anybody's listening, definitely check out all 7 of our other Kawasaki episodes.
Of course.
I personally would say if you like Monster X Strikes Back, you got to see The World Sinks Except Japan. I think those two are like hand in hand.
I mean, it's the second part in the World Destruction trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
They're a trilogy seemingly without a third film.
So with that, I think we're going to conclude this on the most noblest of podcasting traditions. And Rex, I think you know what that is. Can you tell me what it is?
Well, are we going to link ourselves, perhaps?
Yes, and it goes something a little bit like this. Hello, I'm Elijah, and I have a kaiju and tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am part of the rotating hosts for Monsters with Attitude. You can check us out on YouTube, where we do monthly live streams talking kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place to talk to like-minded people. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. Currently, I write for Kaiju United. My most recent article is actually, I believe it is an interview with Donnie Winter. I think I've been saying it's Kong King of Exploitation, but I'm pretty sure it's a Donnie Winter interview. A Donnie Winter view. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Shut your mouth.
And my writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster. Outside of writing and podcasting, I served as a consultant on the upcoming Titanic Creations officially licensed Yongari action figure. More info should be out by the time this episode comes out, but you can subscribe to emails and text messages from Titanic Creations to stay up to date with all the latest news on that figure at TitanicCreations.com. I also have had the privilege to produce bonus features for SRS Cinema. I have worked with them on Yuzo, the Biggest Battle in Tokyo, and I am developing materials for Liverleaf and War of the Ninja Monsters, Jiron vs. Gora on Blu-ray, and I even acted as an audio commentator for Yuzo. You can order all of those Blu-rays on srscinema.com. I'm also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and older YouTube videos, along with an ever-growing playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting new videos out soon, so definitely check that out. I've also appeared in a kaiju movie, a little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021. I made a brief cameo in the film as Skywatcher number 2. It's got a rating of 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so if you want to watch more kaiju, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online retailer. Or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads or buy it on Amazon Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at ET13_productions and my X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. And Rex, where can people find you at?
Well, dear listeners, you can find me on YouTube at Rexino, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't. That's actually a lie. I am saying a bold-faced lie because I'm literally using a MacBook right now to do this podcast. But you can rate us on Spotify. To stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, head over to www.kaijuconversation.com to find all of our episodes, social media links, news, and updates. Follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually, we'll have original artwork on there, but until then, you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. Most recently, we had a discussion in our General 1 chat about doing a Godzilla -2. So they're talking about the hopes and possibilities of that, so that's a pretty interesting topic to talk about. It's a great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusives to the channel like bloopers for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Kerchevsky on the channel. I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry for that. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and the other content we upload. His links can be found below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Grattan Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. Minoru Kawasaki Month is almost coming to a close for good.
Just
one more episode, and we're done. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in to all of these episodes and following us on this journey. It's been a lot of fun. So with that, we just got one last thing to say, and that's to remind everybody to always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
Bye.
We are set, we are in debt, there's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. Kaiju, not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.